My name is Casper. Casper Oakman. I'm here today with Jennifer from Dixa. Jennifer is the marketing director of Dixa, and she's an absolutely awesome person. And myself is I'm a head of marketing at Compliant. And
And also a very awesome person.
oh, that was so smooth. uh, we decided to join forces because I think we have a lot in common, and this is kind of our first podcast, so please bear with us. But it's gonna be really good.
Yeah.
I
Be
think
nice.
yeah. We're going to talk today about, we decided to start up by taking a topic that not that many people talk about these days. Would you agree, Jen?
I would agree. Not enough is said about it, and I think there's a lot of misinformation. So I think it's really important that we talk about our experiences, and people can take from that what they will. We're not. I think maybe it's important to lay out for this podcast. We're not telling people what to do.
Mm.
Every business is different. All people are different, but this is our experiences, what we've seen, and take it for what it's worth. Take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. And if you're still curious, then we're talking about, today we decided to talk about review platforms, specifically for B2B marketing. So here we're, surprise, surprise, probably going to focus on Captera and G2 Crowd, but we're kind of talk about the whole space and some of the benefits and also definitely some of the drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for the ones who are not really into just start marketing journey, Jen, can you talk a little bit? Maybe start with Captera. What is Captera?
So Captera is a review site. It's part of the Gartner suite. It actually has Captera, GetApp, and Software Advice included. And it is your standard kind of review site where you upload your information, you upload your product information, your pricing information, all that good stuff. And it allows you to collect reviews from existing customers, and then it's used a lot as a comparison tool. So you're able to, the customer can easily come onto those platforms and compare you to your competitors and see features and then pricing and all of that good stuff to help them make a decision, including reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Captera is also like the biggest one out there, like in terms of just sheer amount of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I think Captera is the biggest one. And that leads me to the other one, which is G2 Crowd, which is also a B2B software platform. So it's helping people find the right software. I think in terms of history, I remember in the early days when I used G2 Crowd, it was a lot about people would come in and say, hey, I'm looking for this type of software. And then G2 would help them facilitate that. It's gone a little bit more over to just being closer to Captera. It's probably smart because the other model wasn't working that well, but it's still a really big player in the game. It works in very similar ways. I think the main differentiator, and we can get to that in a sec as well, but it's just where in Captera you pay like a cost per click.
Mm-hmm.
So under the categories, you pay literally whenever somebody clicks on your profile or ad, that's when you pay. Whereas in G2, it's more like a flat rate for a year, your service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are there any other players we're forgetting here, Jen, in your experience?
From my experience, I mean, you have your trust pilots as well, but those are purely reviews. It's not really lead generation. So I acknowledge that Trustpilot is really important, but in terms of reach and getting leads in, I think these are the two main players, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Trustpilot is like it's very good for B2C. Like if you were in doing e-commerce or something, Trustpilot is massively important. When I was my time at Templify, I remember I always got a bazillion review platforms almost every month that would pop up, and I would like, okay, I've never heard of this platform before.
But let's be there. You got to be present, right?
Exactly. And I remember the whole marketing team, and everyone would always be, yeah, we got to be there. I was like, okay. But I think if you do some research yourself, when you're sitting out there and you get these, because trust me, once you get to a certain size, the thing they do, and this is so tacky, I don't even know if you know about this, Jen, but they actually scrape so Captera and the G2 Crowd, these new review sites, and scrape company profiles, and then sometimes they hook up to your website and then scrape the data from there, and then they automatically fill out your profile and then tell you, hey, you need to update your profile. I'm like, we don't have a profile.
You do now.
That's what you do now. And, you pay to make it better. It's like, I remember I can't remember the name of it, we had this like Indian, like Indian company, and like relatively big, like 50 employees or something. And suddenly we just had a profile there and we just got traffic. I was like, okay, sure. How did that happen? I haven't done it.
Mhm.
So that's how a lot of them do it. That's why you will see a lot of it out there. But
That actually, I have kind of a little nightmare story of that as well, because when I used to work at 23, which is a video marketing platform in Copenhagen, there is a company called 23 based in Israel. And the scraping, I think it was G2, confused our two companies. So they had, kind of a little bit of our stuff and our profile, but saying that we're based in Israel. And then it was really, really confusing. And it was really hard to change, to kind of identify, hey, these are two different companies. We just happen to have the same name, but we're on totally opposite sides of the world. So yeah, that's the downside. One of the downsides of that kind of practice is accuracy, which is kind
yeah,
of important.
exactly, right. And you end up having to deal with someone else's problems, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh, whatever.
I don't have time for this. Yeah.
I really don't have time for that.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about like so I think without saying too much, I think there's a clear preference between you and I on which platform we like the most. But
Yeah.
let's talk about a little bit about like maybe some of the benefits of using these platforms. So let's start about like the overall. What would you say is the benefit of using a platform like Captera or G2 for that matter?
I think from the customer's point of view, it's the comparison, right? They're going to go on there and they're going to compare me and my biggest, maybe two, three biggest competitors. And so for my business, that's really advantageous that we can be side by side against, in our case, household names, essentially, but to show actually we have more of this, and our pricing structure is different. And it's not, for me, so much, it hasn't really been about the reviews, but that opportunity to be side by side with your biggest competitors, and that's really your chance to kind of shine
Mm,
when it kind of levels the playing field in a way. We can't compete on budget, we can't in terms of advertising and things like that, but here's our chance to be side by side, see the benefit of my product versus these other ones.
definitely, I totally agree with that. And I remember at Templify, we kind of had the issue that the people who would be comparing us would always compare us to solutions that weren't really comparable. It's like
Right.
I think it's like you bring up a good point, because I think they're very strong tools when you can compare them to similar products.
Mhm.
So if you go with let's say, I think let's use 23 is maybe a little bit better example, but 23, when that is the case, like that's a video platform, so you would typically compare it to Vidyard, right, or
Mhm.
Vistia maybe. And there you can
Mhm.
clearly see, okay, here's the difference between taking that platform, that platform, that platform.
Mhm.
Whereas in Templify, we really struggled with like being compared to others, because like it's such a complicated space we were in. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to compare features when the features no one knows what they are, if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, that's a great point.
Uh, I think one thing I definitely want to bring up, that I think the reason you want to be on these platforms and use them is that they're very close in terms of intent.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I always when I talk about marketing, I always talk a lot about intent, and I think these two the review platforms do something very unique. That especially Capterra and G2, when people come to that platform, they're looking for a solution, like a software
Mhm.
solution.
Yeah.
They're looking to, especially like if you go to a category with compliance in, like compliance management, well, then you're probably looking for a solution to your compliance management.
Mhm.
And so those people, what I've seen also from Templify is that they can convert way faster.
Yes.
Like
Yes, because they're ready to buy.
they're ready to buy, right? Like they kind of
Mhm.
mentally, it's like the same idea of like Google Ads being way faster in conversion rates compared to
Mhm.
other like compared to LinkedIn and
Yeah, they're
Facebook.
not coming across your content. They're not coming across your checklists or your top 10. They are, I need this. Where do
Yes,
I find it? Yeah.
they're looking for a solution, and they're in the right mindset, right? So that's where I've always found it very powerful, and that's definitely why I keep using it to some degree,
Mhm.
but also yeah.
I think something that's interesting about this that just popped in my head is,
Mm,
you and I have both worked in companies where the technology didn't exist really. It's not, we're not doing something that is very obvious. And so the downside, if you're like a disruptor,
mm,
say, is you have to educate people about disruption, and that's maybe the downside of a platform like this, is you're kind of going for the common denominator.
Yes, that's a very good
I
point.
work for
Yeah.
mine is a customer service software, but we're so much more than that. So when you go up against a ticketing system like Zendesk, we're using people's already existing knowledge about that platform, but actually we're different. So it's kind of, you're missing that level of education. So they're not, we see ourselves as customer engagement platform, but people aren't going to Google that, right? Or people aren't going to necessarily search for that on, unless what we did on G2 is we actually created a whole new category called customer engagement, conversational customer engagement, to make sure that we're in that. But you're kind of balancing this idea of tapping into what people already know, but also trying to educate them that this is going to change the way you work. And
exactly, and like we had the exact. It's so funny you bring it up. Exact same problem when I worked at Templify. Like a template management, it might be a
what
thing
is
now,
that?
but it definitely wasn't a thing back then. Like,
Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
wasn't a thing. So, and we were in like, I think we were in document generation, and we were in all these like document automation platforms. And while the tool like Templify did some of that and does some of that, it's not entirely what we do, like what they do. Keep saying we sometimes, but it's not entirely
Past
what they
tense.
do.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, past tense, right? And I think so as a takeaway, I think it's important when you start out and consider using some of these platforms. There's definitely, unless you have the resources and power behind making a category like you are doing at Excel or Templify is doing, then it's often way easier when there's a category already established. I like to use Falcon as an example. Falcon.io. They have these like their social media management tool. They have a very defined category, right? Like it's everyone knows what that is. And I've heard from multiple people that at least I don't know if it's still the case, but they used to have really good results in these review platforms, which does make sense to me, right? Like this really makes a lot of sense. So one takeaway you can definitely take from hopefully more, but is that you got to have a defined category that makes it a lot easier to be on these platforms.
Absolutely.
So I have one question. So I don't know how like I have actually multiple, but how much do you think reviews matter on these platforms?
That's the ultimate question, and that kind of comes to a larger question about kind of branding and social proof and all of that. I think social proof is very important, but I think that there's other things that maybe, I try to put myself in the consumer's shoes, right? And if I'm looking at something and I'm not sure it really meets my needs, but it has a lot of reviews, I'm still not gonna probably go for it. So I think it's a balance of being very clear about the benefits, being very clear about what you do, and then the reviews for me are kind of a secondary. I would take reviews over like awards won, for example, and
that's
we
a
can
good
talk
point.
about that a bit later, because you can buy pretty much any award you want.
Yeah.
And I think consumers are getting smarter about that. So I would give reviews more weight and gravitas than an award, but I wouldn't give it more than a feature specific side by side comparison.
No,
How about yourself?
No, I totally agree. I think in your comparison between awards and reviews, I think reviews are way more important. Despite the fact that people seem to know that there's a lot of fake reviews and a lot of these like you can kind of make things happen on your own way. There's still a lot of trust in it. There's a lot of testimonial power in having good reviews. The thing I've been thinking is that I feel like there's a cap. So there's when you have 0 reviews, that's bad, especially if you've been there for a while. If you've been around the block for a while, I think the cap I always say like you need to get to 10 reviews. That's just to be like, okay, we're here.
We're legit.
Yeah, we're legit. Exactly. It's like a legitimized like thing. You're legitimately a company. I think the next bracket, I've been thinking about that for a while. I think it's like 50 to 100. Once you get between 50 to 100 reviews, that's when people think like, okay, there's a lot of people using this and there's a lot of people talking about it. And at least for me, that's been like a thing where I was like, okay, we need to get to 10 first, and then the next goal is to get to 50 to 100, because that's when you become a little bit more of a thing. We're not talking getting to 2,000 or 1,000 like some of them do, and all kudos to those. But it depends a lot on what the type of software organization you have and how easy it is to get reviews.
Absolutely. And that's the issue that I've come across time and time again in any job I've had is, I can't ask one customer to leave a review on 5 different platforms.
No,
That's just not,
it's just not happening.
it's
Uh,
not happening at
I
all.
feel like sometimes it's even hard to ask for two. Like
Yeah.
we
One.
exactly it's hard to ask for even one, and now it's like, can you also, while you're asking about Captera, can you also ask about G2? It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, exactly. So you have to, from my experience, you have to be smart. You have to look at, okay, where do we get the best traffic? Where do we get the best leads?
yeah,
Then let's put the reviews on those sites.
exactly,
And
exactly
maybe
right.
that leads us on to our next topic.
And then let's I think that's also the final thing we really want to talk about today, is
Mhm.
like how if we have to be blunt, what do you think about Captera versus G2? Which one are you preferring?
Captera,
Yeah, me too.
100%. Yeah.
Can you explain a bit why?
Well, first off, Capterra has I think, a better pricing model where you pay for clicks and conversions. Now, whether those become one customers, different story, but at least you're paying for people engaging with your profile. They are active. It's Capterra, GetApp, and software advice. So you do your profile once. And for the most part, of course, there's tweaks here and there. It goes live across all 3. It has higher traffic, from what I understand. And Capterra will translate your platform into a bunch of different languages. Excuse me, your profile. So you can tap into Doc, you can tap into other parts of EMEA, which is what we're trying to do. So when I look at the numbers, I'm a numbers gal. So are you. Well, you're not a
Mm.
gal, but a numbers person. I look at the numbers and I say, okay, well, X amount of leads have come through Capterra. I can only have people leave reviews on one site. I'm going to go with Capterra. And then
Yeah.
naturally that, it's a snowball effect where you get more and more there, but then other platforms fall by the wayside.
Exactly, and I like one thing you talked about here too is like this like whole cost per click versus flat rate. Like, if you're a complete transparency, I'm not really a big fan of this whole model of like paying to be on top, like on top of these lists.
Mhm.
In full transparency, but I have to live with that. But I think Capterra is also just like way easier to get started with, right? Like, because we're, without disclosing too much, we're paying several $1,000 a year to be present on G2, and like, speaking of results, we did not see that good results, at least in my period at Templify.
Mhm.
It's very like, not impressive. Whereas Capterra, at least it felt like you were getting what you're paying for. Like,
Mhm.
it's not like it's not. I'm not in the camp where I was overly excited, but I was definitely in the camp where I was like, this is working. It's working and it's moving in the right direction. And that's despite us Templify not having this like clear category as we talked about.
Mhm. Yeah, I had the same. I've worked in 2 companies now that used G2 and Capterra. And actually, my first company, I shut down G2 because I
Mm.
was paying way too much money. Yeah, I mean, we're talking over $30,000 a year, which is essentially a salary that I could get someone to do these things for me,
Yeah.
and I wasn't getting the leads.
No.
Whereas Capterra, I was paying monthly per click, so at least I could see something. And even if they don't, even if they don't become a customer, I can retarget them. I can't
Yeah.
retarget
Like,
G2 that well. I
no,
can't.
exactly. Like, it's a very good point. Like, you at least got traffic through
Yeah,
Capterra, right?
you can do
Like,
something to play with.
yeah, and I feel like one of the models G2 moved over to was this like intent model, where they
Hmm.
kind of give you this what they call intent data. So, hey, they've been looking at this category or this competitor, maybe they're interesting to you. Like, don't get me wrong, like, it's powerful, and that was kind of one of the things I really liked, but it's not carrying the weight of the platform. Like,
Hmm.
because it feels like they solved that part, which is 10% of what I wanted for, but the 90% is really lacking, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So I think on that note, we'll end this episode. I think it's a good time. We spent approximately 20 minutes. So
Not
uh,
bad.
yeah, that's nice and easy. But any last thoughts on these two platforms before we take off?
I think, yeah, just you have to know your business better. But I think if you're going to actually look at to me, G2 is great for branding.
Mm,
It's a great branding exercise. You get those badges. We use those badges a lot. So I'm not going to say G2 is a waste of time. But I think if you have only X amount of money and X amount of resources and you want to put it someplace that you know you're going to get more out of it, then I would look at the Capterra, the GetApp, the software advice platforms.
yeah.
My 2 cents.
No, I totally
I
agree.
welcome other people having other experiences. I welcome to hear from them,
Yeah.
but that was mine. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's also like it's brought up, like it feels like Captera is always the one ranking highest in terms of organic, right? So that has always been a stamp of approval in my book, at least. So,
Cool.
anyways, on that note, thanks for listening in, guys, and take care and tune into our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.